In the far reaches of the galaxy, where stars shimmered faintly against the blackness of space, the peaceful coalition of alien worlds faced a threat unlike any they had encountered before. Their once tranquil existence was shattered by a relentless enemy and unstoppable force that swept through star systems with merciless precision. The coalition's leaders, wise but desperate, knew their own strength would not be enough to turn the tide. In a moment of grim necessity, they sent a call across the void to a legend whispered about in galactic corners: the Deathworlders. Humans from a brutal, unforgiving planet where only the strongest survived. These humans were known not just for their fierce determination, but for a wild unpredictability born of endless struggle. When the fleet finally appeared, it was not what the coalition had expected. Instead of sleek, orderly ships and disciplined soldiers, the aliens found vessels, battered yet formidable, crewed by hardened humans with eyes that told stories of hardship and survival. The humans moved with a rough confidence, their methods alien and sometimes unsettling. The coalition's diplomats and commanders exchanged uneasy glances as cultural clashes erupted almost immediately. The humans disregarded formal protocols, speaking plainly and sometimes bluntly, refusing to mask their intentions behind polite words. Some alien officials whispered fears that they had invited chaos into their ranks, that these Deathworlders might be more danger than help. Yet beneath the tension there was a spark, something wild and powerful that the coalition could not deny. The humans' readiness to face any danger without hesitation, their refusal to back down, began to inspire cautious hope. But trust was fragile, and every meeting ended with more questions than answers. The enemy's shadow loomed ever closer, and the coalition had little time to waste. As the Deathworlders prepared to move out, the aliens watched with a mixture of skepticism and fascination, wondering if this strange new force would be the salvation they sought, or the chaos that would consume them all. As the Deathworlder fleet settled into the coalition's command structure, it became clear that their approach to war was nothing like the aliens had ever seen. Their training was harsh, bordering on brutal, designed to push every individual beyond limits that others would never dare to cross. The humans spoke openly of their failures and weaknesses, never hiding the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. A sharp contrast to the polished diplomacy and careful lies the aliens were used to. This brutal honesty created a strange kind of respect among some of the alien soldiers, even if others found it unsettling. The Deathworlders refused to accept defeat under any circumstance, viewing every setback not as a failure, but as a lesson to be learned quickly and ruthlessly applied. When it came to technology, they were fearless. Instead of relying solely on the coalition's carefully designed ships and weapons, the humans tore them apart, modified systems, and rebuilt them to fit their chaotic style. Weapons that had seemed too delicate or complex were stripped down and hardened, while ships were reinforced with unexpected materials scavenged from their own fleet. These changes made the vessels less elegant, but far more durable and dangerous in close combat. To the aliens, it looked reckless at first, flying into battle without the usual precise formations or waiting for commands from the top. Yet, in the chaos of skirmishes and sudden attacks, the Deathworlder style began to shine. They thrived where others struggled, using unpredictability as a weapon, confusing the enemy and turning disorder into deadly precision. Still not all members of the coalition welcomed these changes. Some feared that the Deathworlders' rough methods might bring ruin as easily as victory. Secret meetings were held, where whispers of mistrust and warnings about losing control circulated quietly. The fear was not just about the battlefield, but also about what this wild human spirit might do to their fragile alliances and cultures. Despite the tension, the humans remained focused, determined to prove that their way was not just about survival, but about winning a war that seemed impossible. The question hung in the air: could the coalition embrace this fierce, raw force without losing what made them who they were? As the enemy grew bolder, pushing closer to the coalition's borders, time was running out. The Deathworlders prepared to show exactly what they meant when they said failure was not an option, and the galaxy held its breath. waiting to see if these humans were the allies they desperately needed or a storm that would change everything. Forever, the quiet tension that had built up over weeks exploded suddenly when the enemy launched a brutal assault on one of the coalition's largest outposts, expecting an easy victory to break the fragile alliance's spirit. Their attack was swift and merciless, striking without warning, confident that the coalition forces would crumble under their overwhelming firepower. However, the Deathworlder fleet had anticipated this move, without waiting for formal orders or the usual cautious strategies. The humans sprang into action with a fierce and unpredictable energy that startled both enemy and ally alike. Rather than meeting the enemy head-on in traditional battle formations, the Deathworlders scattered their ships into smaller, faster groups, using the cover of asteroid fields and debris to set deadly ambushes. These hit-and-run tactics confused the enemy commanders, who were used to predictable responses and straightforward confrontations. The humans exploited every weakness in the enemy's formation, striking from unexpected angles before disappearing into space like ghosts. Alongside the physical assault, the Deathworlders employed psychological warfare, broadcasting distorted enemy communications, sowing doubt and fear among their ranks and making the enemy question if they were walking into traps at every turn. The aliens watching this unconventional fight were initially uneasy, their old beliefs about honorable combat challenged by the raw efficiency and cunning of the humans. Yet as the battle wore on, it became clear the Deathworlders were not reckless. They were relentless. They pushed the enemy back with an intensity that no one had expected, holding positions that seemed impossible to defend and refusing to give ground even when outnumbered. The air was thick with tension and fear, but also with a strange admiration. For the first time, many alien soldiers saw a different kind of strength, one born not of tradition or protocol, but of sheer willpower and adaptability. When the dust settled, the coalition's outposts remained in their control, battered but unbroken. The victory was far from complete, and the enemy was regrouping. But this success had changed something fundamental in the minds of the coalition leaders. They could no longer dismiss the Deathworlders as wild and dangerous outsiders. These humans had proven they could turn chaos into order and desperation into triumph. Still, deep down, there was an uneasy feeling that this was only the beginning of a far harder fight to come. The question lingered in the corridors of power and on the battle-scarred decks of the fleet. Could the coalition truly embrace this fierce new ally and survive the war that was closing in on every front? The answer remained uncertain. But the Deathworlders had made one thing clear: giving up was not an option, and the war had just become much more dangerous for their enemies. The coalition was still riding the high of their recent victory, a rare moment of hope in a war that had seemed endless and cruel. Ships hummed with repairs and celebrations echoed through command centers. But beneath the surface, the mood was far from secure. Intelligence officers brought a chilling update that shattered any illusions of safety. The enemy fleet was far larger than anyone had dared to believe, and far more ruthless. Even more disturbing was the discovery that the war itself was being controlled by a shadowy force lurking deep in the enemy's command structure, a force skilled in manipulation and deception, pulling strings to prolong conflict and increase suffering for its own dark purpose. This revelation sent shockwaves through the coalition's leadership, forcing them to confront the terrifying reality that the true enemy was more dangerous and cunning than they had prepared for. Amid this uncertainty, the Deathworlders stepped forward with a plan that shocked many of the coalition's more cautious commanders. Rather than waiting for the enemy to make the next move, the humans proposed sending small teams deep behind enemy lines to infiltrate their command centers, sabotage key systems, and dismantle their plans from within. This aggressive strategy was risky, almost reckless by alien standards. It demanded trust in the Deathworlders' fierce instincts, born of harsh survival and endless battle. The coalition found itself at a crossroads, clinging to the slow, careful strategies that had kept them alive but uncertain, or embrace the brutal, decisive mindset that defined the humans. The choice was not easy, and debates raged long into the night. Yet, as reports came in of enemy forces preparing for an even larger assault, hesitation could mean annihilation. The Deathworlder's way, raw and unforgiving, might be the only path through the darkness. As the Alliance struggled to unite under this new plan, spies and saboteurs slipped silently into enemy territory, their presence unknown but deadly. The Coalition waited with bated breath, hoping that this gamble would pay off, and knowing full well that if it failed, the cost would be more than just lost ships and soldiers. It would be the end of their hope for freedom. The shadow over the war grew darker by the hour. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance, resting on the sharp edge of human resolve and alien trust. The moment of truth arrived deep. Inside enemy space, far beyond the reach of any usual battle lines, where the Deathworlder fleet launched their daring and dangerous plan with precision and fierce determination. The humans moved like shadows, striking at weak points. The aliens had never even noticed hidden communication hubs, critical supply routes, and command centers thought to be impregnable. The enemy's carefully constructed order began to unravel. As the Deathworlder's teams infiltrated their ranks, spreading confusion and panic that rippled quickly through the fleet, ships that once moved as a single unstoppable force were suddenly disorganized and vulnerable. Their commanders cut off from each other and scrambling to respond to attacks from every direction. Amid the chaos, the Deathworlders displayed an unbreakable will, refusing to retreat or surrender even when outnumbered or outgunned. Their relentless push broke through lines that seemed impossible to breach. Their survival instincts, honed by years of fighting on a planet where giving up meant death. The alien coalition watched in awe and disbelief as this raw human spirit reshaped the battle, overturning every expectation and forcing them to reconsider what true strength really meant. For many, the sight of the Deathworlder's tenacity and ingenuity was a revelation, proof that survival in the universe was not about perfection or tradition, but about adapting, enduring, and fighting with everything you had. When the enemy command finally collapsed, the entire hostile fleet fell into disarray, retreating in confusion and fear as their once secure control crumbled beneath them. The war, long feared to be unwinnable, suddenly shifted toward hope. Silence settled over the battlefield, and the Coalition counted its hard-won victories. A new respect blossomed between alien and human alike. The Deathworlders were no longer just mercenaries or wildcards. They had become indispensable allies, their fierce survival spirit a beacon in the darkest hours. Across the Coalition's worlds, stories spread of how these humans forged in. The harshest conditions had changed the course of the war and perhaps the future of all species involved. In this moment of peace, fragile yet promising, the galaxy learned an unforgettable lesson. Sometimes, it is the harshest worlds that breed the strongest warriors, when, and in their strength, lies the hope for survival and a better tomorrow. The final battle that would decide the fate of countless worlds began not with a grand fleet engagement in open space, but deep within the heart of enemy territory, where few dared to venture and even fewer believed a victory could be won. The Deathworlder fleet, backed by the cautious but hopeful Coalition forces, executed a plan born from desperation and human ingenuity, striking at the very nerve center of the enemy's war machine. The humans moved with a purpose forged in the fires of their harsh home planet, a place where failure was not an option and survival demanded every ounce of strength and cunning. Infiltration teams slipped through shadows cast by asteroid belts and abandoned stations. Using technology modified beyond recognition and tactics learned through brutal experience, each strike was precise, targeted not just at weapons or ships, but at the enemy's ability to command and control. Communication hubs were sabotaged, severing links between enemy vessels and leaving them isolated and confused. Supply chains were shattered, cutting off the flow of vital resources needed to keep the war effort alive. Most importantly, the Deathworlders targeted the enemy leadership itself, silent operatives moving unseen to dismantle the sinister force that had pulled strings from the shadows for so long. As the enemy fleet scrambled to respond, their once coordinated lines broke apart. Ships that had moved like a single living organism suddenly lost cohesion, drifting like wounded beasts in space, vulnerable and directionless. Commanders shouted, frantic orders that arrived too late or not at all, while their soldiers faced the terrifying realization that they were fighting without guidance. The Deathworlders pressed this advantage with unrelenting ferocity. They struck from unexpected angles, ambushed fleeing vessels, and cut off retreat paths. Where others would hesitate, the humans charged forward, driven by a survival instinct that had been honed through centuries of hardship on a world that demanded toughness above all else. This tenacity was unlike anything the aliens had seen. Many Coalition commanders, who had doubted the Deathworlders' brutal methods, now found themselves awed by the humans' ability to adapt and dominate in the chaos of battle. The war was no longer a slow, measured conflict, but a storm of raw energy and willpower that swept away enemy defenses with terrifying efficiency. Yet the humans did not fight blindly. Their strategies were brutal but intelligent, shaped by a deep understanding of survival's harsh rules. They combined the best of alien technology with their own relentless spirit, creating new weapons and tactics on the fly that baffled even their own allies. The battlefield became a place of constant change, where those who adapted survived, and those who clung to old ways fell behind. For many aliens, witnessing this human way of war was a revelation that challenged their deepest beliefs about strength and honor. They had long valued order, precision, and tradition. But the Deathworlders showed that sometimes true power lies in the willingness to endure, to fight through fear and pain, and to never give up no matter the odds. Slowly but surely, the tide turned. The enemy's command structure collapsed under the weight of relentless attacks and internal sabotage. Their forces, once proud and confident, were thrown into chaos and panic. Without leadership, discipline broke down. The enemy fleet fragmented into scattered pockets of resistance that could no longer coordinate or fight effectively. As this happened, the Coalition forces pressed their advantage, pushing the attackers back and reclaiming lost territory with new hope and determination. The victory was hard-fought and costly, but it marked a turning point in the war. The long nightmare of defeat and fear gave way to a cautious optimism that spread through the Coalition's worlds like wildfire. The Deathworlders, once viewed with suspicion and fear, had proven themselves to be more than mercenaries or wildcards. They were heroes, allies, whose fierce will and unbreakable spirit had turned the impossible into reality. Of battle, as ships limped back to repair bays, and soldiers shared stories of near defeat and narrow escapes. The Coalition's leaders gathered to acknowledge the new reality. The humans were not just a force to be tolerated, but an essential part of their future. Peace was still fragile and uncertain, but it now felt within reach, a dream made possible by the harshest warriors from the harshest world. Celebrations erupted, but there was also reflection. The galaxy had changed, and with it, the understanding of what it meant to be strong. It was no longer enough to rely on tradition or safety. Survival demanded courage, adaptability, and the willingness to fight fiercely for every inch of space and every moment of life. The Deathworlders embodied these truths, a living testament to the idea that sometimes it is the most brutal and unforgiving places that produce the strongest fighters and the most determined hearts. For many aliens, this lesson came at a great cost. But it also offered a new hope, a chance for peace built on respect, trust, and the fierce bond forged in the fires of war. As the Coalition looked to rebuild and prepare for whatever challenges might come next, they knew one thing for certain: humanity. The Deathworlders from a distant, savage planet had changed the course of history forever. Their legacy would be one of strength, survival, and the unyielding belief that no matter how dark the universe might seem, there was always a way to fight back and reclaim the light.